You're listening to Catholic Chicago. Ahead, the Archdiocese of Chicago brings you programs about the people, events, and issues that touch our lives. Welcome to Catholic Chicago.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for watching and listening to our program here this morning on this bright, cold morning here in Chicago. It is November 21st already. It seems like time is just trucking right along, trying to catch up with it here as we prepare for Thanksgiving in a couple of days here. So what I'd like to do now is sort of go over the rundown of our show here this morning. We have a kind of wide variety of topics here in November as the legislature is in the midst of its veto session, preparing to return. Is that next week or the week after? And then we'll change gears a little bit and then swear in new members for next year, and we'll have a whole new list of people that we deal with in the legislature and issues that we'll be involved with. But many are the same, but many are different. And but before we deal with next year, let's sort of take a look back at some of the things that we dealt with this past year, specifically sort of the past couple weeks and months. What I'd like to do is kind of go over the rundown of the program here today. We have guests from all over the country, I guess you might say. Our first guest is Emily Schumacher Novak. She's going to talk a little bit about the past election cycle, and not so much on who won, who lost. We almost know who won and lost by now. Still working on it in some places, but not so much who won and who lost. We basically know that. But a little bit about kind of the overshadow issues of civility and politics and what we can do about it going forward and what happened in the past. We're going to switch gears there after that, and we're going to take up an issue that I hope it's past breakfast for some folks. It's about human composting, and I'll just save that topic description for later. It's an issue, believe it or not, they're going to be dealing with at the General Assembly upcoming year. We're going to be talking to Matthew Server. He's with the Colorado Catholic Conference, an issue they've dealt with out there. And then finally, take it back here to Chicago, talking with Emily Cortina. She's with the Colby House. I'm going to talk a little bit about a paper that the Catholic Conference is in the process of introducing. It's about restorative justice and what we can do about welcoming those who have been incarcerated or been released back into society. So it's a very interesting topic. I'm sure Emily will cover that well. So let's do this. Without further ado, let's jump into our first subject, topic. We have with us somebody from the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops. Her name is Emily Schumacher Novak. And look at that, by the magic of technology, there she is. Emily, thank you for joining us this morning.
Good morning. It's so nice to be with you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's great that this worked out. It's 8 o'clock in Chicago, but it's 9 o'clock probably where you are, so a little bit more of a acceptable time to start. I always feel so sorry for those people in the West Coast because it's like 4 or 5 in the morning sometimes. So
that's what I was thinking.
We bug them. So the heck, we'll let Matthew wake up. Emily, let's talk a little bit about, as I mentioned, I don't know if you heard the intro, but so the election is pretty much over, for the most part. I think we kind of know who won and lost, maybe some stragglers here and there. But, I think one of the issues that I'd like to talk about is not, we were talking about what we could do about the elections and, review of who won, who lost, what it means, et cetera. I think we've maxed out on that by now, although maybe some of us haven't, but many people have. But I think what I wanted to talk about a little bit is the topic of civility, because the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, I don't know when you embarked on that measure. I think it was either 2 or 4 years ago. You were trying to, I don't know if we ever were quote unquote civil, but what could talk to us a little bit about what USCCB was trying to do with launching that initiative and what was undertaken and how did it go?
Yeah, that's great. I think it's always good for us to talk about sort of civil dialogue and where the roots are, and how compatible it is with sort of our Catholic theology and our Catholic commitment to loving one another. And I just have to say that I am really excited about talking with all of you today. I am actually a native Chicagoan. I was born in Chicago on the South Side, and a Midwesterner through and through. I grew up in Milwaukee mostly, and I've been here with the USCCB for about 4.5 years now. And one of the things that I got to work on when I first came to USCCB was the Civilize It initiative, and it came to us actually from the Archdiocese of Cincinnati, who had done a similar campaign of the same name under the leadership of Archbishop Schnorr in 2016, and had a lot of great success with that locally. And so they generously shared the initiative with us. And so ahead of the general election in 2020, the bishops really wanted to reflect back to Catholics this opportunity for engagement, a framework of how is it that we engage with one another in dialogue that is authentic, that is motivated towards encounter, as Pope Francis calls us to, that helps us to reflect our own values and to identify shared values with those around us, and to be really clear too about what our own values are and how rooted we are in those, and then to look outwards for additional partners in dialogue through a variety of ways. So that's really where it came from, was in the initial 2020 general election. And then in 2021, recognizing the need, for ongoing dialogue, and with the addition of Pope Francis's latest encyclical of Fratelli Tutti, wanting to really reflect on what he calls us to, this better kind of politics. And not politics in sort of the partisan sense, the way that us American Catholics might think about it, but in the sense of how do we build a community, how do we build communities that are focused on the common good? What is that? How do we do that? What are the elements of that? And really, he lays a lot of really wonderful teaching out in that encyclical, and those really influence the way that we revisioned, that the bishops asked us to look at for this sort of new iteration of civil dialogue called Civilize It, a Better Kind of Politics.
And you had activities in the parishes, and you had materials produced and that kind of thing that was sent out broad and wide. I remember talking to, I think, your predecessor about this at one point in time when it first started, back in maybe it was 16, I can't remember, or when the idea was first launched. And so you were able to get materials out through your means of distribution to the parishes, and activities that people could do, things like that, if I recall correctly.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly right. And really, that was the idea that the bishops had, was that it would be something really practical for people to engage with, and for their own reflection too, right? That there's this opportunity for people who are interested in having dialogue, especially recognizing all of the division and polarization that is around us, and how affected we can be by those outside forces, those external forces of people who are just, there's lots of pressure, and there's lots of, we see in the media, civil engagement. And so how can we as Catholics be examples of how to engage in a way that recognizes our love for one another, that recognizes the human dignity of the other person, even when we disagree with them for very good reasons.
It's very difficult. What you're describing, it sounds so easy, but it's very difficult to do. I mean, we all have that. We don't get involved in the political arena unless we think we're right and we have something to say and we're justified in doing so. And when you're met with somebody who's equally as passionate on the other side of an issue, who also thinks they're right and justified in doing this in the public square, it's not. It's increasingly difficult, I think, in the way we communicate through social media, et cetera, to really have an engagement with another person. My concern is that as we've taken interpersonal communication out of or it's less now than it has been before, because so much is on social media, so much is impersonal communication. It just increases that uncivil behavior or uncivil comments. And look, I'll be the first to admit, I have that streak in me too. I mean, we all do. And it's very hard to tamper that down, because your first reaction is to fight back, right? And it was interesting that Cardinal Sipich did an interview. It was on television last night, and I just caught an excerpt of it. And he was talking about the life issue in particular, I believe. Like I said, I just caught the end of it. But he was talking about, room for dialogue. Like, where is the room for dialogue? Like, what could we agree on and what can we not agree on? I mean, there's probably a lot of things we can't agree on, but where does it begin, and can we start there?
Yeah.
Any sort of thoughts about that, or how to encourage other people to do that? This is not an easy thing to do. Lead with what do we have in common as opposed to I'm right.
No, absolutely. And that's really the answer, right? Is that we lead with what we have in common. And I think for us as Catholics, really coming back to that moment of human dignity, recognizing that not only do we believe very deeply in human dignity, but that we're baptized into the body of Christ, and that we belong to one another, and that we are brothers and sisters in this real, very real way, right? So that how do we continue to remember that that is what brings us together, is that we have this shared human dignity. We have this shared made in the image of God. Whether everyone we're talking to is Catholic or not, we believe that we are all made in that same image. And so even when we disagree for very good reasons, helping us to understand that, looking for that common ground of what are the shared values here. And Pope Francis talks about this really beautifully in his book, Let Us Dream, where he talks about contraposition instead of contradiction. And I think that that's a really helpful way that helps me sort of like dial down the negativity or my own reaction, is to sort of take a step back and to think about, okay, what can we share on, and what are the things that we are definitely not going to agree on, and saying that this is a thing that we're not going to agree on, but let's look underneath the issue. You know, what is it that we do agree on? Do we agree on the common good? Do we agree on our search for truth, or for the ability of all people to thrive? And so if that's where our starting point is, then let's talk about like, what are the solutions that we can find that we can agree on that will help us to understand one another. And, you know, I think what you were saying earlier about, it's really hard when there's so much on social media, and we can remove the humanity of the person that we are engaging with. And, you know, our Catholic tradition doesn't really allow us to do that, right? Like, we have to stay engaged. That's sort of the call of the gospel, is to be deeply engaged with one another, because we believe so deeply in community and human dignity and our brother and sisterhood in Christ together. And so how do we see that as sort of the value that we can sort of begin from? And even, you know, that doesn't mean we stay in dialogues that are, you know, not open or not authentic, or where there aren't two people who are really actually interested in having a conversation together, or staying in a place that isn't safe for us, or is, you know, full of harmful dialogue or harmful words. But I think really thinking about what are we talking about when we're talking about dialogue? We're talking about an open conversation that happens between two people who are entering in with goodwill and with interest in the other person. And I think, you know, just that curiosity of one another is really helpful for me, asking those questions to understand first before diving into all of the other things that are going on in my brain.
Yeah, I it's interesting listening to you say that. I don't know if you read the book, or I'm happen to be an AEI, American Enterprise Institute fellow, or whatever it is, and Arthur Brooks used to head up that, and he wrote an interesting book, came out a couple years ago. It's called Love Your Enemies, Love Your Enemies, and he starts the book by recounting a story of a demonstration, and it was a bunch of, I think it was sort of a bunch of pro-Trump people having a rally near the mall or something like that. And there's some kind of encounter, and it's mostly people who are very loyal. And I can't remember the topic, but there were people in the audience who, I think it was a black gentleman, and a couple of them, and they wound up having put that man on the podium to explain like what he was saying and what his position was. And I don't exactly recall it. But the upshot of the story is that they nearly agreed on just about everything. They were like main topics they both agreed on. And there was some disagreement. And at the end of the man's presentation to the pro-Trump loyalists, that as he recounts it, there was kind of this moment of like, gosh, we're really not that much different. We really have more in common than we disagree. So why are we focused on this? And it was this very nice story that he relays about how sometimes if you get to know people and you listen to them, there's something to build on. And that's one of the things that Brooks talks about a lot. It is that, yes, there are things that divide us, but there's still a lot of things that unite us. And can we at least start talking about some of those things as opposed to solely focus on those things that divide us. I'm just wondering if you have any anecdotes or any stories that you encountered in your work on Civilize It, where you had maybe parishes or individuals who were able to kind of bridge those differences with another group or another person.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of those really amazing opportunities that happens when we do engage in dialogue and when we think about what is it that I want to learn, or what is it that I could learn from this other person.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the things I appreciate most about the Civilize It Better kind of politics approach is that it starts with me. It starts with me thinking about what is my own orientation coming into this conversation. Is it one of prayer? Is it one of curiosity? Or is it one of like, I think I'm right and I should win this
right. It's usually
right?
the
So
last.
Like, how do we back that out a little bit of how is it that what is that, where am I coming into the conversation? And I have absolutely, there's so many kinds of times I've had good conversations with people who at the beginning of the presentation or the conversation, they come in assuming we're going to disagree about all kinds of things. I have a particular family member that, we engage on disagreements all of the time,
mm-hmm.
and using these sort of rules or guidelines for conversation that are really drawn out of Pope Francis's Fratelli Tutti helps us to think about what is it that we do believe in together. And there
mm-hmm.
is so much. So, we are very much on different sides of lots of issues. And yet, we are bound to one another because we love one another as members of the same, family and as members of the same faith. And we want the best for one another, and sort of coming back to that conversation of like, I love you as a person and I want the best for you. And I believe that you want the best for me. And so how do we have a conversation about what those shared values are? And they often are those very root values of our Catholic tradition: human dignity, the ability of all people to thrive, the loving one another even when it's difficult. And so how do we really, be that example for one another? And it has brought us closer together. We often would just avoid each other for years. And now that we engage on these topics all of the time, it is a deeper relationship. And so that is really the beauty of, I think, what dialogue can offer to us, is it deepens our communities.
I agree. And that's a great example of you and that other person choosing to preserve the relationship over trying to win an argument. And I think that's one of the things that we have to keep. As long as you're in relation to another person or in a relationship, that will come eventually. I mean, you'll get to a ground. But if you break off the relationship trying to win the argument, well, there you have nothing. And now you have to go repair that, and you're taking 10 steps backwards as opposed to keeping that conversation going. So are you, we have about 2 minutes left. Are you an optimist, a pessimist? Where do we go from here?
It depends on the day.
I used to say, everybody says I have a tough job. You have a more difficult job than I do. My job's a walk in the park.
What you do is really amazing, and I'm really grateful for the work of all of the Catholic conferences around the country. It's really a great partnership and collaboration to work alongside all of you who is sharing this good news about engagement and the ability to sort of deepen those relationships because we care about one another, right? And so the opting out is really is not the option. So like when we can stay in the relationship and preserve it, even when it's hard. And I think that's an important point, is that sometimes it's hard. Like it's not this conversation that I have with any person is not
it's always hard.
Easy all the time, and it doesn't always go smoothly.
It doesn't always, right. Rarely it does. Right.
Right.
No. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So today I am feeling an optimist because I am very grateful for all of the people in our lives and the ability to sort of like look forward to things like Thanksgiving and getting together. And, this is a time when tough conversations can happen.
That's right.
Thanksgiving dinner. Very appropriate timing to sort of think about who am I, what am I interested in, and like, how do I enter into these conversations that, might be a little bit tricky around the Thanksgiving dinner table.
Good point. Good point. Great segue. I didn't even think of that. Thanks I knew that. Right. Emily, thanks so much thanks for taking some time this morning. Good thoughts. So the more successful you are, the easier my job will be. So knock your socks off. Go for it. Emily.
Well, thanks. We are really grateful for everyone sharing the good news. And if there's anything that folks are interested in, civilizeit.org has all of the resources that I was just talking about, and all of them are available available bilingually. So you can take the pledge to engage in civil dialogue at civilize.org and then find resources for prayer and your own reflection. And all, like I said, all of those are available in both English and Spanish.
Fantastic. Thanks so much. Civilize.org is where you can find that material. And I think it's very useful to think about, consider, pray, discern about it. Emily, thanks so much, and have a great Thanksgiving.
Thank you so much. It was great to be with you.
It's
Have
great
a
to
great
be
rest
with
of your
you. Thank you. This is Bob Gilligan. Don't go away. We'll be right back. We're going to switch gears here. I hope everybody's eaten breakfast and settled in now. We are going to discuss next. Well, I'll leave the intro for after the break. Just don't go away. We're right back. It'll be exciting.
Join Catholic Charities on Friday, December 2nd for the 33rd Annual Spirit of St. Nicholas Ball at the Chicago Hilton. The Spirit of St. Nicholas Ball is one of the most elegant galas of the holiday season in Chicago, and proceeds provide critical funding for our programs and services into the new year. Families, friends, and work colleagues make a tradition out of gathering at this extraordinary black tie event to celebrate the Christmas season. Enjoy an opening reception, gourmet meal, and live entertainment courtesy of the Ken Arlen Orchestra, all in support of Catholic Charities. Don't miss this special night for a great cause on Friday, December 2nd. To purchase tickets for the Spirit of St. Nicholas Ball, visit catholiccharities.net/events or call 312-948-6963. That's 312-948-6963.
People always say, how can you spend your day with 3-year-olds? Seeing the changes that they go through and just the journey and how they grow, this is a very rewarding job. Even though at the end of the day, we're not the highest paid people on earth. And when I have a parent contact me and say, my child loves school, that to me, I'm setting that foundation for their love of learning. Because really, you are changing lives, you are molding lives.
Shape the next generation of leaders. Teach. Apply today at artchicago.org/schooljobs.
Do you have an old bicycle that's not being used? Consider donating it to Catholic Charities Veterans Bike Project of Lake County. Skilled volunteers are refurbishing bicycles to make them safe and ready to be used by veterans to get to and from their new places of work. We also gratefully accept financial contributions that are used to purchase bike helmets and other safety accessories. Our veterans have faithfully served the United States, and now it is our privilege to serve them. For more information on the Veterans Bike Project of Lake County, call 847-782-4219. That's 847-782-4219.
Welcome back, everybody. This is Bob Gilligan of the Catholic Conference of Illinois, and thank you so much for listening or viewing, I guess it is, our program on YouTube. The YouTube channel is Catholic Chicago, and the call letters of the station is WNDZ 750 AM. I forgot that. Sorry about that. Now everybody knows that. Okay, so now we got that squared away. So let's make a transition here to our next guest. Our next guest is Matthew Server. He is with the Colorado Catholic Conference. It is a little early out in Colorado, or maybe it's not. They change time frames out there, time zones out there so often I don't know what time it is. He's here to talk about the fascinating subject here of human composting that it looks like, unfortunately, we're going to be involved with here a little bit. Matthew, can you hear me okay?
Yes, Bob, can you hear me?
I can hear you just fine. Thank you so much for taking so. What time is it out there? You guys are on that weird time zone.
Yeah, we're at 7:20.
Okay.
7:24
All right.
right
It's not,
now, but
not
you know, it's a beautiful
too bad.
morning in Mile City.
Not too bad. So Matthew is with the Colorado Catholic Conference and has dealt with looks like a subject that we're going to be dealing with, which is so I haven't looked at your bill, the specifics of it, but I'm sure actually our bill is a work in progress. It really hasn't been introduced yet. They just threw something out there last year and they're going to try to fix it this year. But the topic is human composting. So in essence, why don't you describe what it is? You probably know it better than I do.
Yes, well, human composting is a method of disposition that slowly transforms the human body essentially into soil. It's a process that essentially accelerates the biological decomposition of a deceased person's body and essentially turns it into fertilizer just by the process of slowly rotating it and putting it with other materials. And I think it's in 30 days you get soil.
And my understanding, Matthew, is, and we're developing a position paper on this right now, is that it might not be so much the process that we have objections to, because it's kind of an accelerated process that happens in cremation anyway. Well, it's not accelerated; it's probably not the same. But my understanding is that the controversy is what happens with the disposition, what happens with the soil, as you put it, or the body as it's now exists. So, was that the objections that you guys had in Colorado?
Yes, we felt that the process did not treat the human body with the dignity that is God-given, right? That simply merely turning us to fertilizer rejects the idea in Catholic social teaching that we are God-given, we have God-given dignity that is as stewards of creation, not merely to be spread as soil that someone could use in their garden or could be, improperly spread somewhere that anyone could just walk on. And so it's kind of the same idea of with cremation, you want to keep, even though the church has changed position on cremation, that we still want to keep the human remains together. Well, when you're using it as soil and you allow the human person, what was the human person, to be spread in a garden, that does not uphold the dignity of the human person that God has given us to be.
And did the legislation, it passed in Colorado, correct? So it's law. How long has it been law?
I'm sorry?
How long has it been the law out there?
About a year now. It was passed last 2021 legislative session. Okay.
And so what's happening here, I believe, is there is a company or two that uses that created this technology or is using this technology, and they're the main proponents of it. The other interesting part about this is a lot of the environmental groups have latched onto this, and they've made this part of their agenda as well. At least they started to. I don't know if that's been your experience out there. And we haven't really started any kind of direct lobbying on it yet because there really isn't a bill. As I said, there was one last year. They just put it out there. It didn't really get much attention. My sense is this year they're going to work on it in earnest and really push it. And there's some issues they have to work out with regulatory issues that had not been addressed in the previous versions. But I think, those regulatory issues will most likely be addressed to the satisfaction of a secular audience. I'm just curious, was your legislation, did it pass overwhelmingly, or how much did you guys get involved with this? Did you really fight this strongly, and who are your allies, if you had any?
Well, in the Senate, it passed straight through. In the Chamber of Origin was the Senate, and it passed with 32-0 vote with 3 abstentions.
Wow.
And so it had no opposition in the Senate, but then in the House Republicans objected to it. And it still went through. The Democrats control Senate and the House and the governorship. So it received some opposition, mainly, I think, from some representatives wanting to question the process and gum it up a little bit. And we did oppose the bill. We submitted written testimony, but it's kind of funny. The real area that we've seen is the media. We've received quite a few media requests from, I think, media outlets wanting to understand and wanting to kind of drum up controversy into why we are opposing this, because I think the main argument against it is, well, if people want to do this, why not? Right.
Right.
Yeah. This is whatever. This is just an option. We're not saying you have to do this.
Right.
So that's pretty much been the extent of what we've engaged in, is more media hits. We did not see a successful path to lobbying this to defeat the bill because it had the votes.
Yeah, yeah. It's still too early for us, but the argument that you just put forth, which is that, well, it's just an option and, you don't have to do it, is a hard argument to overcome for us. I mean, it's true. You don't have to do it. But, I mean, it's in essence just one more of these things where I think it's the degradation of the human body. And is that really what we want to be offering people as an alternative? Is that, is that best practice? So, are people utilizing this right now? Do you know? Have you been tracking it at all, or is it just is it still too early?
Yeah, the first actual engagement of the process, or whatever you want to call it, I think occurred last September, and we received in October there was a news article saying that a new facility could do, I think it was 2,400 human of this process a year. So that moved into Denver, and so it is slowly picking up, and it has started in Colorado. I know for a fact that all three of the dioceses in Colorado will not engage in the process, and at least one of them has said that they will not advertise for any funeral services that specialize in this arena. So there was no mandate in the bill. There was no policy to say that funeral services have to do it, but we would be extremely opposed, and we are monitoring the situation to make sure that does not happen.
Yeah. It is a difficult argument to make. Did you find any welcoming arguments from Catholics, or were they pretty much as everybody else? This is just an option, and they have not to do it. So, did the Catholic lawmakers, were they particularly open to your arguments, or is it just the same as everybody else?
Generally just the same as anyone else's. So we had 30 passed without opposition in the Senate, and it kind of, and Colorado has a very strong libertarian streak. Well, people want to do this, go ahead. And I think there are reasonable safety questions, though, attached to this process of, has it really been thoroughly vetted to see if this process is actually safe, if they actually can contain potentially toxic parts of the human body from getting into the soil and affecting it. We haven't really seen what the mass consequences could be. Not to mention the fact that if soil is spread in a public place and I walk on it, then the dignity of the human body, notwithstanding, that is something that I, as a member of society, do not want to experience either. Now, I don't want to walk on essentially a grave on human remains. And so I think there are some other arguments that you can make as to why this shouldn't be the law of the land. It's just that's not as convincing, I think, to even Catholic lawmakers as, well, you don't have to do it.
It's not inexpensive. If I recall correctly, it's more than cremation, but less than a burial. Is that accurate? It's a couple $1,000s.
That's what
it's not cheap.
Oh yeah.
It's like $5,000-6,000 is what I recall. I don't know why I heard that somewhere. One of the things that is yet to be thought through, at least in the Illinois bill, is like once the body is composted, where does it go? Does it have to go to a field of composting? Is there like a cemetery for composting, or can you take it to your home? Can you take it to a park? And one of the things that I understand is it's quite a large amount of dirt. It's like 1 cubic yard, and if I understand that correctly, that's like a pickup truck full of dirt. It's not like it's just not like a shovel. It's a significant amount. Did your law require it to be placed in certain areas, or could it go anywhere? I think you said it could go into a park.
I believe what they said is it can't be sold illegally and it can't be used for food. So you can't.
Great.
You can't. Yes, small victory. You cannot make lettuce in a garden that is filled with human compost soil. But if I remember right, there were no. I believe there were a list of regulations, and I'm blanking on what exactly those were. But I know there were at least some limitations on what you could do, and you couldn't just spread it around willy-nilly. But it wasn't as if you could only keep it in one space, and that was part of the argument in committee. Was I wanted to keep this in my flower garden so I can come and visit it because it's my mom or something like that.
So they allowed for that, or they did not?
Yes,
they did.
Yeah,
that's interesting. Yeah. So, going back to what you were saying before about the media inquiries, do you think people's position? Do people understand the positions of the church, or is it one of these like, oh, there you guys go again? Not letting people do what they really want to do, or do you think that you got any respect for sticking up for the dignity of the human body?
I think it kind of goes both ways. On one hand, I do think kind of that let me do what I want faction of American thought anymore just rebels at the idea of, well, you disagree with this, but that doesn't mean I can't agree with that. And right. I'm sure, Bobby, you get that all the time in Chicago. Mm-hmm. And so I think there definitely was that. But I do think there is an element of, well, this is a very odd procedure. It doesn't necessarily make sense when you think of it at first of, wow, you can become soil and that soil is a human person. And so I do think there is an element of people questioning this, and they're looking for, it doesn't sit right, I think, with their conscience. And I think in some respects, people are looking for, well, why doesn't it sit right with my conscience? And the argument is strong that the human body is not made to merely be soil. That degrades it to nearly part of the earth. And when we know through Catholic social teaching that we are stewards of creation, not merely, as George Weigel would say, fertilizer. Yeah,
right. I mean, that's exactly, to make a technical term, the ick factor in this is really huge. And that's kind of what we're going to play up. And we will be respectful and go into this just espousing the church's teachings about the dignity of the human body. And I think this is one of those issues where, unfortunately, the libertarian aspect in a lawmaker will probably prevail, and we'll see what happens. But it's interesting so far. The Private Cemetery Association is not happy with this, so they might be engaged in this as well. We have good relationships with them and some of the other cemetery associations in Illinois. I mean, is it enough that it could prevent passage? We don't know. Illinois, Colorado's probably more pronounced, but in Illinois, the environmental lobby is significant anymore. They're very strong with the whole attention towards climate change and things like that. They really have some influence down at the state capitol. So we'll see what happens. I'm just curious. So Colorado has it. Do you know what other states have it? I think there's a couple others. There's Washington. I think it seems like all the West states have it, or entertaining Oregon. Yeah.
I think Oregon did. It was either Oregon or California, one of the West Coast states. I think California did. So it's slowly, Colorado was the second state, and I think it's slowly percolating.
Yeah.
I think people just, I want to do that. And again, there's no secular argument that I think lawmakers are going to oppose of, well, you want to do that, but I don't want you to do that.
Yeah. We had, in many places across the country, the Democrats had a good day on Election Day. There's now more than a supermajority. They have the majority by 18 votes in the House and, like 11 in the Senate. So there's plenty of votes there. And I'm not even sure if this is a partisan issue per se. It's just one of these issues where I think if it resonates with the individuals thinking like, oh, geez, I don't really want to I don't want, my public reputation to be that I supported this. I think that's probably the only thing we have going for us, but we'll make our position known like many other issues and see what happens out there. Matthew, thanks so much for taking some time this morning. Learned a lot talking to you. Keep my expectations in check, and we'll see how it goes come January, because I'm sure this bill is going to be discussed, and I'll probably be calling you for advice on media interviews.
Sounds good. Thanks, Bob. Thank you so much for having me this morning.
Thank you, and happy Thanksgiving to you and your family. That was Matthew Server.
Thank you as well.
From the Colorado Catholic Conference. We're going to take another break. Don't go away. We're right back. We're going to be talking with, we're going to come back to Chicago here. We've been in Washington, Colorado, and we'll come back to Chicago. We're going to talk to Emily Cortina. She is, I don't know what her title is. She has a big title. She's with the Colby House. People know that. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
Catholic Charity's 75th annual celebration of giving is underway in support of those who are struggling to make ends meet every day. Individuals, families, colleagues, neighbors, parishioners, and friends purchase thousands of gifts and basic necessities to ensure Catholic Charity's clients and their families have a joyful Christmas morning. There are many ways to get involved, including online wish lists that make giving easier than ever before. If you can join us in this special Chicago Christmas tradition as volunteers and donors, please email us at cog@catholiccharities.net. That's cog@catholiccharities.net. Or call 312-655-7401 in Cook County and 847-782-4210 in Lake County. Thank you for helping us spread Christmas cheer this year throughout Cook and Lake counties.
There is no doubt this life is short. It is in you I trust to spread your truths, your goodness, and love. It is you who will give a leader to our church. Who will fill these shoes?
Join Catholic Charities on Friday, December 2nd for the 33rd Annual Spirit of St. Nicholas Ball at the Chicago Hilton. The Spirit of St. Nicholas Ball is one of the most elegant galas of the holiday season in Chicago, and proceeds provide critical funding for our programs and services into the new year. Families, friends, and work colleagues make a tradition out of gathering at this extraordinary black tie event to celebrate the Christmas season. Enjoy an opening reception, gourmet meal, and live entertainment courtesy of the Ken Arlen Orchestra, all in support of Catholic Charities. Don't miss this special night for a great cause on Friday, December 2nd. To purchase tickets for the Spirit of St. Nicholas Ball, visit catholiccharities.net/events or call 312-948-6963. That's 312-948-6963.
Welcome back, everybody. This is Bob Gilligan of the Catholic Conference of Illinois, and thank you so much for listening or watching our program here today. YouTube channel is Catholic Chicago, and the call letters of the station is WNDZ 750 AM. And back for our last segment here on this exciting show we've had here this morning is Emily Cortina. She is with the Colby House, and I have your title here. It's Coordinator of Outreach and Formation. I got it right. Is that right? Close. That's right. Close enough. Emily, before we get into restorative justice, that kind of thing, tell us a little bit about Colby House in a minute or two. Just describe what it is so people know what we're talking about.
Yeah, Colby House is the jail ministry of the Archdiocese of Chicago. We serve individuals affected by incarceration in Cook and Lake counties. So the center of our ministry is really Cook County Jail, where there's about 5,500 people detained on any given day. And we serve families as well and folks who are re-entering the community after incarceration.
It's one of these programs that the church runs that I'm not sure how many lay Catholics know about it. Probably a good number do, but for those who don't know, they should know that the church is involved in such a integral part of people's lives who have been incarcerated for whatever reason and trying to get on the right path. And there's Colby House to try to help them and nudge them along the way. And it's not an easy job. There's a lot of issues that go into helping somebody who's in such a situation. Tell us a little bit about, Emily, kind of what's going on with the whole, you've been involved for a while on the topic of restorative justice. Tell us, what is the definition of restorative justice and how does it work into the Colby House's mission?
Sure. Restorative justice kind of reorients the way we think about justice. In the United States right now, the dominant idea about justice is punitive justice, where we find the person who's done harm and we hold them accountable by punishing them. And in restorative justice, we look at the questions in a different way. We ask what harm has been caused and who's been harmed. So it really centers victims of wrongdoing. And then the resulting action is, how do we heal the harm? So instead of looking primarily at punishment, we look towards healing and what actions are needed to result in healing for all parties involved.
And I know you're involved a little bit with the Restorative Justice Project, which actually convenes people together, people who have perpetuated a crime and for individuals who have been harmed, and also then people in the community trying to, bridge that those gaps and what has happened there. Any success stories that you can relate to us in those efforts?
Colby House is not an official site of restorative justice courts. There are a couple of restorative justice courts in Cook County. There's one in our neighboring neighborhood, North Lawndale, that the Catholic Church has also been very involved in. St. Agatha, the local parish there, it's very involved in the restorative justice court. They just graduated their first class. It's been a few years, but because of the pandemic, that was delayed. Mm-hmm. So they just graduated their first class, and they're really looking to expand that program because it just brings such a different result from someone ending up incarcerated for their infraction. They can go through this process of facing the harm that they've done, really being able to accept responsibility for it, having an opportunity to apologize to the people that they've harmed, and then together with people who are harmed in the community, kind of identifying some steps for healing. And sometimes that means maybe they're going to finish their education, do some job training, make amends for what they've done by community service that's targeted at the wrong that they committed. So I know it's been that community court has been successful, and Cook County is looking to expand that.
Yeah, and it's been talked about in other parts of the country, I know, in terms of how could other communities replicate that model and take elements of it and use it. Let's talk a little bit about a paper that has not been released yet. It's called a Catholic Vision for Restorative Justice in Illinois, and I know you had a hand in it, as did many other the individuals who are involved with ministering to people who are incarcerated. And I should probably back up a little bit just to explain that Illinois is 6 Catholic dioceses, and it has the Catholic Conference serves the whole state, and the bishops have appointed different individuals from their respective dioceses to come together, and they discuss the issues that, in this particular example, they discuss the issues of restorative justice or criminal justice reform and what's going on with ministering to prisoners or people who are incarcerated in their respective dioceses. And it's interesting, Emily, I'm sure from your perspective being in Chicago, to listen to the stories of the people downstate and the issues that they're grappling with and how they are similar yet different than what we deal with up here in Chicago. So I think one of the things that we learn at the conference, or we see, is just how big and varied a state Illinois is. It's just the nature of what we do and how we do it and that kind of thing. Tell us a little bit about, I don't know to agree you're comfortable with, but just tell us a little bit about the paper itself and your involvement in it and what it means to Colby House.
Yeah, well, like you said, on this committee, the representatives from the different dioceses, we gather regularly and we share about our ministries and what we're doing, and talk about ways we can collaborate. And one of the main reasons we come together is to identify legislative priorities, bills that are coming up whether we want to support them, oppose them, invest resources in really trying to promote something that we think would make a difference for the people that we serve. And we found that we had a need for building some common foundations that we could lean on when we're discerning which policies to support or oppose. And so that's kind of where this statement started, is saying, let's try to put down on paper what our common beliefs are, what the church is calling us to, and what kind of policies that might lead us to support in the Illinois legislature.
And it's interesting too, in that whenever you start peeling away the layers on a topic like this, it's like, where do you start? Because the cause, what leads an individual to engage in bad behavior that resulted in them being incarcerated or penalized, and they may be serving time, there's a number of different reasons for that, and there's a number of different things that the state and anybody can get involved with to help repair. There's also the issues of what happens while they're in jail. There's definitely some things that need to be improved there, so there's legislation on that topic area as well. And then, of course, there's I think what the paper kind of focuses more on is the reentry, is when people have served their time, they're ready to get out, and what can we do as a society to help move them, or as a state and society, how can we move them towards, making sure they don't recidivate, if that's the right word, they don't commit a crime again, but also trying to help them, become the best version of themselves and be a productive members of society. Reentry seems to be so important. Tell us about some of this. I mean, you see this at Colby House all the time. When an individual is released from jail or prison, what do they go through? I mean, that's one of the things I think that's really needed right now, is especially when an individual is released from a downstate prison, they live in Chicago. What happens then?
Yeah, and I mean, what I love about this statement is that it does include all of those aspects that you mentioned, recognizing the breadth and the scope of the issues that are related to incarceration. And it really is a moment right now when a lot of organizations, government and private organizations, are recognizing the need to rally around folks when they're released from incarceration. We're seeing that even though their punishment is expired, they're paying for the rest of their lives. So when an individual is released from prison, they're given a bus card, $10 maybe, and just, an idea where they want to end up. We've met folks downtown who are coming back to Chicago from prison after 20 or 30 years in prison, and they don't, they've never used a smartphone. They don't know how to navigate CTA systems right now in Chicago, let alone be able to sort of get all their things in order, their paperwork, right? Get an ID, set up it while they're looking for a job, set up the government benefits that they're entitled to help them get on their feet. Start finding a place to live, and an employer, a place to work. So folks who are released from prison face all these barriers. And it's really a moment where a lot of organizations are coming together and saying, how can we work together to serve people in the best way, to help them find stability, and, as you said, really become the person that they want to be, that they were made to be. And so this is part of Colby House's ministry. We provide the basic material things that they might need when they get out: toiletries, clean clothes, because they really switch just the clothes on their back. We get gift cards to Subway Sometimes they come to our door straight out of prison and they say, here, go have a meal, get some food, breathe a little bit, and then let's come back and sit down and talk. So we provide them with these immediate material needs, and then we build a relationship with them and walk with them as they find the resources they need, as they identify, do they want to rebuild a relationship with family that they've been separated from? How do you do that? How do you navigate having a relationship with maybe a child that was a baby when you were arrested and now is a teenager? So helping them sort of navigate these challenges and know that they're not alone. A lot of folks they might start off with a lot of hope and excitement about their future, but when they meet these barriers and they see how difficult it is, they start to lose hope. And that's when folks start turning to, maybe the wrong crowd that they were involved in with before, people who are going down unhealthy paths. So when they have someone they can lean on and say, hey, I'm starting to feel really down about this, and someone can be there to say, you know what, let's pick it up, let's keep going. There's still hope. Let's look at another option. You're not alone.
Yeah.
And that's what Colby House tries to provide.
I remember George Brooks, who was one of your predecessors, who was out there for years. He used to often say, when does the X become an ex-felon? When do you drop the X? And it's true. If I want people to think about this, when you apply for a job, when you apply for many different things, housing, anything like that, you're often asked, have you ever committed a crime, have you ever a felony? And then, then you can easily go into, the do not call back list. As you indicated, housing is a huge issue. We have this, I guess, justifiable thinking in society that, people who have committed crimes shouldn't live within certain distances of fill in the blank, daycare centers, what have you. But when you're in an area like Chicago, it's pretty compacted geographically, 500 feet. It's easy to find a daycare center or whatever. So, individuals released from jail, they can't live in certain areas, and then where do they go? And like you said, and what we're all trying to do is just make sure that that individual with the good intentions who's trying to get on the right path can do so, as opposed to going back into that same behavior pattern or around the same people that may have been led them to where they just released from. Emily, we have about 2 minutes to go. So are you an optimist, a pessimist, or are you just looking at your work? It can probably be overwhelming and daunting at times, but I'm sure there's some really good stories, positive stories that kind of keep you going. In terms of how we handle people who have been released from prison, do you think it's getting better, or do you think the challenges are just escalating more than the opportunities?
Oh, that's a hard question to end on. Of course, I'm hopeful. That's the true benefit of being in a faith-based organization, is that there's always hope. We're always looking towards the resurrection. And we do see, the main part of my job is working with parishes across the Archdiocese. And we do see people who really want to connect on a deeper level. We see parishes saying, we'll do the donation drive for items, but we also want to go deeper. We want to know people. We want to build relationship. And I think exactly when you're talking about isolating people, we want to keep ourselves safe. And so we isolate people who we think are bad, but that has the exact opposite effect of what we're going for, which is to help us all heal. And that takes community. And so I am hopeful because I see people hungering for that community and reaching for it, and then taking action steps to build it.
Yeah.
And so I am hopeful.
I am too. I think you're right. When you encounter many people, they're open to it. Not everybody. It's not for everybody, but I think there are a lot of people out there who are open to it. And like there's groups like Colby House out there who can help show them the way and how to help. That's encouraging, and I think that's on the path we're on. Just before we close out here, how do people get in contact with Colby House and your ministry?
Well, they can find us through the Archdiocese website. We are part of the Archdiocese, so we have a page there. You can also go directly to colbyhouseministry.org and find us there. yeah, all of our contact information is there. So I think that's the best place
It's
to
pretty
start.
easy to find. The Colby House, the Arch page, as Emily indicated, and just Google Colby House and it'll come right up. Emily, thanks so much. Have a great Thanksgiving. Thanks for taking some time this morning. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Bye. This is
Bye.
Bob Gilligan. Thanks for listening and watching our show here this morning. Thanks to our guests, Emily Cortina, Matt Server, and Emily Schumacher-Novak. Very interesting, exciting guests. We'll be back on the third Monday in the month of December. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.